Hey everyone, this is Athletes and Antiquities. In today's video, we're going to talk about the seemingly obvious question of how do you find the market value of a card? Now, the reason why I said this was a seemingly obvious question is because on surface level, it seems like a dumb question. Like, oh, what's the value of this Zacian V? What's the value of this Lucario level X? You can just you can just put it on eBay and find a price range. And that's the key there. You find a price range. Because here I want to talk about this idea of a market value of a card and why it really doesn't exist. And I'm going to explain why. And if you disagree with me at all, I'd love to let you know. I'd love to hear your opinions. And I'm going to use market fungibility to talk about this. So fungibility is, I'm just going to read off the definition, is the ability to replace or be replaced by another identical item. And it gives you an analogy of being mutually interchangeable. So something that is completely fungible is money. These $2 are completely fungible. 100 times out of 100, I can exchange one of these dollars for another of these dollars because they are the same. They are transacted exactly the same. Another fungible item is a stock. If you own a share of Apple and I own one share of Apple, those two will always be equal. It doesn't matter when I bought mine, when you bought yours. It doesn't matter what exchange I bought mine on, assuming they all have similar rates of just base rates of charging and stuff like that. The actual value of that stock is the same. You might get taxed a little bit differently, but the value of that stock would be the same because it's a very optimized market and that item, there's no variance in the item. It's not like, oh, I have a better Apple stock than you. No, a stock is a stock. So, but with Pokemon cards, that is not the case. So two of the same card are not fungible in any way. So these two Zacian Vs, they look very similar, but there's slight differences with them. One is a little bit more centered than the other. One might carry a little bit more value than the other. So to say, even though they're very cheap, it'd be a difference of pennies. One of these Zacians might be more valuable than the other because of very minute changes, where in other instances, with other types of things people buy with the idea of making money down the line, they don't really have that issue. Like these two Lucarios, there's a very big difference here. These two Lucario level X's, they are the same card, but this one is in much worse condition than this one. These are not fungible cards. If I had this beat up Lucario card, I could not look at your Lucario card. This may be, this might be like a PSA 2, this might be a PSA 7, whatever. I could not hand you this card and say, can I have your Lucario for my Lucario? A smart person would not do that deal because these, even though it's functionally the same card, they have the same attack. If you're playing in a deck, these could both be used in the same way. But in terms of a collectible item, these two items are not fungible. And so it goes even further with when you grade cards. These are two cards from the same set, and there's a lot of arbitrage you can go into with here. With oh, this one's a 9, this one's a 10. So therefore, either they're different players, obviously, but this 10, so it's better. But what if the 9 grader had a bad day, What if, I don't know, something happened, or, this is an older cert, maybe the graders changed and the strictness changed. There's all these things there's all these tinfoil hat theories you can put in your head to why you should value one more than the other. There's a strong 9, there's a weak 9. You might have even if you have two 9s of the same exact card, one's strong, one's weak, those two are valued differently in the market. You can see that with very valuable cards. With very valuable cards, you'll notice that there is a variance in grades. Like with a PSA 10 first edition Charizard, it's such a valuable card. A good 10 versus a weak 10 can mean thousands of dollars differently. In every other instance, that's an identical card in terms of just looking at it on paper, but holding that card, it loses all fungibility. You apply a motion to it, and once you apply a motion to it, the value can change wildly. Like I said with certs, maybe you don't like old certs, maybe you think old certs are bad, so maybe this older PSA 10 with the 2 cert is not as good as this modern PSA 10 with the 5 cert. Or this old 1 cert PSA 9, maybe you think, oh, it was stricter grading before, I think that 9 could be a 10 now. There's all these different ways you can extrapolate a difference in price on very similar items. And that's kind of how a lot of people in this hobby actually make money. I know Catch 'em All Collectibles Dan, he has a lot of videos about grading arbitrage, where he'll take one card from one grading company, cross it to another company, and then profit because of that, because we have this emotional attachment to different grades and stuff like that. I know in one of his videos, he turned, I think it was it a PSA 3 into a CGC 6 first edition Charizard, stuff like that. The card did not change, but the way we view that card has now changed, and now it's worth thousands of dollars more because of that. Or if you go the other way, it could be thousands of dollars less. These items are not fungible. You can apply emotion to it and get a wide variety of values. That's why I want to say there's no such thing as a market price for a Pokemon card. Even though this 10, this is a PSA 10 of a Tropical Wind card. It's a desirable card that transacts a decent amount, not a lot, but you know, it's not a super rare card by any means. So you can always find one on eBay or one that just sold. So you can get a general idea of price, but that's all you can get. You can get a market range, not a market price. There is a market range of this Tropical Wind of a few $100s. These numbers might be wrong. I'm using these as an example, but let's say I sell one of these, or someone sells one of these for $350 one day. Then a week later, it goes up on, it was on auction for $350, and then I put it up, buy it now for $400, but there's none of the other available, so someone buys that. Has the market value changed? No, it's still within its market range. If it goes from 300 to 500 to 700 to 900 over the course of a few months with lots of sales, then you can say, oh, that market range is changing. But to be able to look at a card and give it an accurate market price is very difficult to do. Someone could just not look at the auction houses that day, and someone that would pay more all of a sudden doesn't. There's all of these things that don't exist in other ways of transacting items of value, whether it's like a stock or something, that like you can't compare a stock to a card. It bothers me when people do that, when they say, oh, like this card is like the S&P 500 or whatever. Like you can't make that claim because there's such a variance with that card, and no one is really emotional towards the S&P 500. I don't buy a share of QQQ because I think it looks good on my coffee table. I'll buy a Tropical Wind because I like the art and I think Torchic is cute or whatever. Like it's such a different world that it's very hard to apply this exact value. So when people see these price changes, people often act very erratically. I know at the time of making this video, if you're watching this later, currently the price of Moonbryon, I know every time someone mentions Moonbryon, everyone rolls their eyes, but the price of Moonbryon has been changing a lot recently, and it's very hard to figure out why that item is changing in price. PSA 10s of Moonbryon were only a few $100s about 4 or 5 months ago, maybe half a year ago, and they spiked up to 1,000, and they spiked up to 1,500. And now they're coming back a lot. Now they're close to the 1,000 mark for a PSA 10 Moonbryon, and it's hard to figure out why is that happening. If it was a stock, if it was currency, because like people often, you can track the value of currency compared to other currencies. With those very optimized items, you can say, oh, the price dropped. Like the number has gone down, the price has dropped. You can see the graph on the screen, it's very obvious. But with a card, if a price changes, is it changing because there just were 3 people happened to all list the same rare item at the same time? Or is it rising in value because one hasn't been listed for a while? Did the auction end at a bad time? Did the auction end at a good time? All of those things will change the value or the return you get by selling an item in this hobby. And it can be very drastic. I know this isn't going to be an exact, I can't recite this exactly perfectly, but I think it was PWCC about like 4 or 5 months ago, a very large amount of Team Rocket booster boxes all sold. People, because you can't really communicate this, they all just happened to send their items to PWCC at the same time. And that caused all the prices to tank. I think it was PWCC, or maybe it was a different auction house. Whatever auction house allows booster boxes, I'm not sure if all of them do, but one of the auction houses hosted like 3 or 4 Team Rocket first edition booster boxes all in the same auction, just by chance. And because of that, the price like tanked on them. They were all down like 30 or 40% or 50% of what typical ones have been trending at, and everyone like freaked out for some reason. And if you looked at it, you're like, oh, this was just an anomaly because it was a poor circumstance of selling. But if you don't have the knowledge of how emotional these cards are, you can think, oh my gosh, this price is going down. So when you see these wild market changes, I urge you to be more careful about jumping to a conclusion based off of that. Did this card go down because people just don't care about it anymore and it's genuinely trending down over the course of multiple sales? Or did one erratic sale make the entire hobby overreact to something? So what do you think about this in regards to how current things are going? There's a lot of hype around certain cards right now, and a lot of cards are going up in value very rapidly, some very modern chase cards. And I just want to think, like, what do you think about that? How much of that is just the swaying of markets, and how much of that is actual demand, and how do you distinguish those two things? I'd love to hear your opinion on that, but that's all for today. Thanks. Bye.